Welcome to the 11th in our series of political candidate forums in advance of the August 23rd primary election. This forum, a cooperative production of the League of Women Voters of Tallahassee, the Tallahassee Democrat, and WFSU Public Media. Our candidates today are running on the Democrat ticket for Florida's State House District 8 primary race. I'm Tom Flanagan from WFSU Public Media. I am joined by James Call from the Tallahassee Democrat and Trish Neely from the League of Women Voters of Tallahassee. We're going to be questioning the candidates on various topics throughout the next several minutes. So let's get a glance at the ground rules, and then we are going to meet those candidates. James?
Thank you, Tom. The Democratic candidates for Florida State House District 8, sitting left to right, are Hubert Brown, Gregory James, and Marie Rattigan. Joining us by Zoom is Gallop P. Franklin. Mr. Franklin, please tell us briefly, why are you joining us by Zoom today?
Yes, thank you for that question. That is a great question. There is some pharmaceuticals in reference to trying to help with bringing down the price of pharmacy drugs. And so it was an important meeting I had to go to. And that's why the time frame has been difficult for me to make it back to the WFSU public media station. So just working on trying to bring down the cost of prescription medications for citizens in the state.
Thank you, sir. Reminder for those watching us on social media, please hit the share button and help all your friends see today's discussion too. So here's how the forum will work. We'll rotate which candidate gets to answer first. We have a lot of questions, so we're going to ask the candidates to keep your answers to about 60 seconds, sometimes shorter for follow-ups. We will keep time. And when your time is up, the bell will ring, and it sounds like this. You don't have to come to a dead stop right then, but please finish your sentence, and then we'll move on. During the forum, candidates should not interrupt a fellow candidate's response and should refrain from personal attacks or charges on any individuals, including fellow candidates. Please note, if another candidate mentions your name in a response, you may request 20 seconds for a rebuttal. In the middle of the forum, we will have the ever-popular lightning round when we ask you to keep your answers to just one sentence. At the end of the forum, we'll give you 90 seconds to make the case directly to voters and share your website or any other information you would like to make available.
If you're watching on Facebook and you have a question for our candidates, go ahead and type them into the comment section and we'll get to as many of them as we can. Time is extremely limited, so you can improve your chances of your question being asked if you keep it brief and certainly keep it polite. And make it a question applicable to all of our candidates today. Candidates, any questions before we get started?
No, ma'am.
All right, then let's just jump right in with our first question.
Okay, thank you. Leon County Democrats held their summer rally on Saturday. Some of you were there. The rest of the local delegation who spoke all said, in essence, in one way or another, that elections have consequences. And this election, this year, is one of the most important elections of our lifetime. Do you agree with that sentence? And if so, why is this year so important? We'll start with you, Mr. Brown.
Okay, thank you for the question. It is one of the most important elections in years. And part of the reason why is that a number of laws were passed and a number of others are on the board. For example, a woman's right to choose is something that's going to be front and center in the coming legislature. Also, we have an issue in this state of great needs because unfortunately so many social issues were taken up and took up so much space of the legislature. For example, we need affordable housing. I work with the City of Quincy Community Redevelopment Agency, and I see how, like when I was growing up, substandard housing, and we got to get better and do better, such as not raiding the Sadowski Affordable Housing Trust Fund so that we can provide that. We have to do economic development so that we can give our youth something to do and prevent them from going into crime because they're connected. When youth don't have hope, then often they're left to go into crime. So we need to pass some prevention measures, because there is a study that was done by the Washington State Institute of Public Policy that showed for every prevention program we have, we save $10 for everyone put in.
Thank you, sir. Mr. James.
Well, thank you. One of the things that I think is so important is that every voter must make known their voice. So the election is important. All elections are important simply because it gives you the opportunity to have your voice heard, to make sure that you're part of a system that is about change. When you fail to vote, when you fail to exercise your voice, then you're saying that what takes place in your city, what takes place in your county, what takes place in your state really doesn't matter. So with everything that we see that is happening in the state of Florida, with all the new laws that are being passed, this election and any other election, it's vitally important. Me, myself, I wasn't able to vote as a formerly incarcerated person. So when 2018 came and Amendment 4 hit the ballot, because of our work and our efforts in that, then it is my greatest task to make sure that every person that is registered to vote in every election.
Ms. Rattigan?
I believe that this statement is true. Freedom is on the ballot. This past session, as a legislative aide, there were numerous of bills that was passed that attacked our fundamental freedoms, right? One of those is HB 7, HB 5, the right for a woman to choose, the right for union workers to bargain, but not only those bills, the right for history to be taught in school. So freedom is on this ballot, but not only that, the LGBTQ plus community is on this ballot. Immigrants, teachers, union workers, undocumented people, felons, students, seniors, small businesses. Our basic freedoms are on the line, and it's our duty to make sure that our voices are going to be heard in this election, especially with the congressional redistricting maps and the whittling down of the Democratic vote, but also Governor Ron DeSantis just trying to strip everything that we have worked so hard for.
Thank you. And Mr. Franklin?
Thank you for that question. Great question. Every single election is so important. I believe that this election as well is important. And as we know, Abraham Lincoln said a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. For it to work the best, we need to make sure that everyone's engaged and involved in the political process. And so, like so many candidates just mentioned, women's rights are on the ballot. We have to make sure we have people there at the Capitol that's going to prevent people from decreasing the right that women have for reproductive services. Voting rights from the ballot. As we know, legislation passed to have police force essentially at voting ballots and precincts. We need to make sure people are good that can help folks vote, not have people making people not be able to feel comfortable voting. Cost of living is on the ballot. Economic development, poverty is on the ballot. Affordable housing is on the ballot. Homeowners insurance. As we know, homeowners insurance are skyrocketing. For a plethora of different reasons, we have to make sure we have the right people there to solve those problems, have the intellectual capacity to do so. And state employees are on the ballot. As we know, state employees did get a 5.3% raise. We need to make sure that our employees are supported. We're making sure that our state employees are well compensated, have automatic increases of their salary based on performance.
Time is up, sir.
Thank you for the question.
All right, folks, our next question here. I think all of you list economic development as the number one policy issue for the residents of Gadsden and Leon counties in District 8. Now, the district's poverty level is nearly double the state average. The median income is around a third less than the state average. So how do you go about changing those numbers, reversing that course, if you will? And Marie Rattigan, let's start with you on that, please.
Sure. So I believe that opportunity and success should not be guaranteed by someone's zip code, who they know, as well as power. Something that's very important is being able to work with community organizers, work with allies, also work with different institutions to bring jobs in rural areas, not only in rural areas, but also in Leon County. I think that something that'll be beneficial is being able to have a hospital in Gadsden County. We know that Gadsden County does not have a hospital, and being able to talk with ACA and see what is the certification of need to bring that hospital there would not only be able to provide jobs, but it'll also make sure that everyone has the quality of care and health.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Gregory James, your take on the question, sir.
Well, I think that it's so important that we be able to bring jobs, as one of the candidates just stated. But beyond that, there are jobs. But the question is now, how do we provide the kind of services that is needed in Gadsden with the different citizens that are there who are dealing with mental illnesses, who are dealing with the fact that their educational level is not in a place where it needs to be? How do we put before them the opportunities that they need so that they can be successful? So I think once we begin to bring a community in place, a community that embraces what's within the community, and then we begin to bring those opportunities there, we're going to change the whole trajectory of what the county looks like and how the county sees itself.
Thank you, sir. Hubert Brown.
Yes, thank you. Part of the issue that we have, especially for our youth, is we have to make sure that our youth are trained to do the jobs that are available. And also for small businesses, one of the things that I helped work on at the City of Quincy's Community Redevelopment Agency was helping our small businesses to survive and expand, to give them some assistance. Like during the time that COVID was ravaging small businesses and things were shutting down, one of the things we did was the small mom and pop small business grant program, so that those small businesses could continue to expand. We need to focus on not just bringing in new businesses, which we need to do, such as the Amazon that the city did a great job on, but we also need to help those that are here. And so we will work hard on that.
Thank you. And Gallop Franklin, you wind us up here, sir.
Great question. Thank you for that question. We absolutely need to focus on economic development. Like you mentioned, poverty is too high. We need to have a war on poverty. And our first step is ensuring that our community is wealthy and are able to have good paying jobs. And so investing in infrastructure to ensure that commerce can happen, ensuring that we're also being sensitive to our growth to make sure we can still protect our environment, but being very, very aggressive in growing small businesses, creating apprenticeship programs with other companies and part of the state to show the smaller businesses in our area what it looks like and what it takes to get to where we need to go. Also need to recruit larger companies to ensure that we can bring higher paying jobs to this region. And we're best suited and equipped to do that of all the candidates. And the reason for that, we have been endorsed by the Florida Chamber of Commerce that believes in our ability to increase the quality of life of this region by focusing on economic development. We've also been endorsed by the Associated Industries of Florida as well.
Okay, that's got it, sir. Thank you.
Okay. So, Mr. Franklin, I'm going to start with you, please, for this question. Democrats are a super minority in the Florida House. You are outnumbered 76-42. How can a Democrat be effective in a Republican supermajority chamber? And you have 45 seconds.
Thanks, Trish, for that question. Great question. You're absolutely right. It's mostly controlled by the Republican Party. But I will say this region has a lot of things in common with a lot of the Republican leadership that are within the House of Representatives. For example, most Republicans in this state are representing rural counties. Because of that, there's such issues like infrastructure that needs to be done, whether it's broadband, ensuring that we have transportation in those areas, whether it's education that's a challenge, making sure we can also invest in trade schools in this region. So there's so many commonalities between this particular district and other districts that are represented by Republicans in the state of Florida that we'll be able to find commonalities to ensure we can bring the resources necessary to move our communities forward.
Thank you for your answer. Marie Rattigan, what do you think?
Thank you for that question. I am willing to work bipartisanly with the Republican Party to make sure that I'll be able to pass some type of legislation that'll be beneficial without compromising my values. And what we do know is that the Republican Party is the majority. However, negotiation is very important, as well as we know that soon enough we're getting very close to where they can overturn some rules without decisions being inputted by Democrats. So I'm willing to join the fight with Democrats to stand up for democracy and what the people need.
Thank you. Gregory James, your take.
Well, my take is that when I look back at the work that I have already been doing, working on Amendment 4, working on putting prayer in schools with some of the legislators that were there, it afforded me an opportunity to work across the aisles. It afforded me an opportunity to create relationships that helped make what we were doing very much easy. So the willingness to work is something that I've always been doing. So therefore, being able to negotiate on what the needs of the district are and working across the aisles to make that happen, it's already proven for me. It was through the work that we did on Amendment 4, where we sat down with Republicans year after year to talk about the issues that we were facing. So that's something that I will continue to do.
Thank you. Mr. Brown.
Well, that is something that draws on my core abilities. As a lawyer, the only lawyer in this race, I am one that has negotiated every day with people who have interests at odds to mine. But I know how to reach out and reach compromise. And I also work on the board of directors of one of the great civil justice, Florida Justice Association. And we have learned watching how to develop relationships across the aisle and make things happen. Also, as a lawyer, I understand the rules. So I know how to work within those rules that when we need to draw them back to it, to keep them honest and to fair negotiation. So I've done it working through the Florida Justice Association, and I also know how to as a lawyer every day.
Thank you.
Mr. James, let's begin with you with this question. House Democrats are in a tough spot. The District 8 seat is open because of a sexting scandal involving outgoing Representative Ramon Alexander, who was the incoming Democratic leader in the House. What skills do you bring to stabilize the caucus and to begin to build House Democrats into a viable opposition to the Republican majority?
Well, I think one of the most important things that we have to be able to do is create the relationship, the skill of negotiating, the skill of being able to sit down and develop what needs to happen for Democrats. The opportunity that I bring is one that, and I hate to say this, but it's real. You know, living life through a prison experience teaches you the art of being able to survive. So we've got to have that within us to be able to sit with Republicans and to be able to show them what it takes for this community, this district, to be able to rise up from where it's at now. So the skill of negotiating, the skill of being able to show a vision that helps unify us is what's needed.
There's a follow-up. What were your thoughts when you learned about the allegations involving Representative Alexander? And putting those allegations aside, did you consider him to be an effective lawmaker? And do you agree with his decision to step aside?
Well, my thoughts were to pray because, at the end of the day, all of us have, experienced something. You're looking at someone who experienced life plus 40 years in federal prison. So for me, it was not a moment to pass judgment. It was a moment for me to encourage him. It was also a moment for me to share with him, hey, keep doing what you're doing because you're an effective leader. Choices have consequences, but that's not the end of our story. So I'm a young man who understands that men fall, women fall, but it's the tenacity that we have to get back up.
Ms. Rattigan, do you want me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the first question is, the House Democrats are in a tough spot with the seat being open. It's part of the challenges. And what do you bring to the table to stabilize the Democratic caucus and help to build it into a formidable opposition to the Republican majority?
Yes. So what sets me aside from all of the candidates is my ability to lead with integrity, my compassion to serve the people while also being empathetic and sympathetic. This past session, I was a legislative aide for State Representative Felicia Robinson, so I had a front row seat on how laws were being crafted to directly impact the everyday people. So I met with a plethora of people, stakeholders, Black and brown people, white people, union workers, immigrants, undocumented people, to see how I could be of assistance to them when my state representative was on the floor, how I could be able to draft bills and amendments to allow their voices to be heard. also as a community organizer and activist who's been on the floor working with the people, my
Yes.
duty is to help them.
Okay, and the follow-up question is, we're a small town here in Tallahassee, and you worked at the Capitol. So what was your reactions when you learned about the allegations against Representative Alexander? And do you think he was an effective lawmaker? And if so, do you agree with his decision to step down?
Yes, so it wasn't my duty to pass judgment on what was going on. Of course, I did hear it with being internal. I do believe that he was a good person when it came down to holding the opposite party accountable and being vocal for issues, which is why I'm also trying to carry that torch as a community organizer and activist to be the voice for the voiceless. And I'm sorry, I forgot that last part that you asked.
Do you agree with his decision, with Representative Alexander's decision to retire from the Florida House?
If that was the decision that he wanted to make, there's no reason why I should pass judgment upon that.
Okay. Mr. Franklin, do you need me to go over this question again, or are you clear on what I'm trying to get to?
I'm clear on what you're getting to, and thank
So
you for
go
that
ahead,
question.
sir. We'll start. You're on the clock.
Okay, yes, sir. I believe if we're lucky enough or fortunate enough to get elected to the state house, we need to make sure the Democratic Party starts to get back to the basics and focusing on serving people. Oftentimes, things get kind of convoluted in reference to ideologies. Where should the Democratic stand on what type of issues? And so I do believe we need to focus on what really matters, which is ensuring that people can afford to buy a car for their child. People can really understand no matter where you're born, you have an opportunity to get a quality education. And so we need to make sure that we're focusing on the basics and focusing on serving people. And as a party, we also need to amp up our ability to negotiate and build relationships. Obviously, we are right now controlled by the Republican Party in all three branches. And so how do we assert ourselves in ways to make sure that we can find the commonalities to be effective, but still hold the Republican Party accountable?
Okay, sir. The follow-up, and again, we are a small town. We all know each other. And the question is, what were your thoughts when you learned about the allegations involving Representative Alexander? And do you think that he was an effective lawmaker and agree with his decision to retire?
Representative Alexander was a phenomenal and effective lawmaker. And he had the intellectual capacity and he understood how to navigate the landscape of the Capitol. There's numerous amounts of initiatives and funding initiatives that he was able to get accomplished for this district. And so he did a phenomenal job in that position. And in reference to the allegations, all I could do was really just pray for him and support him in all the things that he desires to do as he moves forward in his life. And so I cannot disagree with someone. I do think he was an absolute phenomenal leader, but I do support his decision that he made to decide to focus on what he thought at the time was more important, which is his family.
Mr. Brown, it's your turn. Do you need me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the first question is about the situation that the House Democrats are in. It's a super minority, and the House Democrats are in confusion. The seat is open because of a scandal involving outgoing Representative Ramon Alexander. And the question is, what skills do you bring to the table to help the House Democratic Caucus to become an effective opposition to the Republican majority?
First, I will lead by example. I'm someone who has been married for 35 years to my wife. I'm involved in our community and my church. And also, though, not only by leading by example, I would also say that as an attorney, I know how to craft winning arguments. And that's something that we have to do to message, because when I'm preparing for trial, I have to look at all the facts and bring together something that the jury is going to believe and go our way. For example, Democrats are on the winning side of things like women's rights. We're on the winning side. We're on the winning side of things like healthcare, expanding Medicaid so we can also help with economic development. But more importantly, so over 700,000 Floridians can get healthcare. We're on the winning side for things like gun control, 21 years old to buy them.
Okay. And the follow-up question is, what were your thoughts when you learned about the allegations? And do you consider, in putting those allegations aside, do you consider that Representative Alexander was an effective legislator? And do you agree with his decision to retire?
My first thoughts were that I felt for his family. and I wished him well and for his family because I do not wish evil on anyone. Second is that I believe his decision probably was the right one because they did not need distractions in order to carry out the people's work, because that is what's most important in representing the people. And third, as far as whether he's an effective leader, his colleagues thought he was. He was scheduled to become the minority leader. So I would not disagree with his colleagues.
Thank you, sir.
Folks, I just checked the current temperature here in our area, and we are once again nudging into 90-degree territory. And so we're seeing that record heat wave all over the globe, it seems, and even in our area here. And Tallahassee area residents are opening up those utility bills right now, and some of them are literally getting sticker shock on this after a stretch of nearly 100-degree days. So how urgent is the climate change problem, do you think? And what can the Florida legislature do to actually make a difference? 45 seconds. Mr. James, let's start with you.
One thing what we have to do in the legislature, we have to look at what we already have in place. We have to figure out how do we revive some of the legislation, how do we work in a better effort to serve the people so that they can make the adjustments, like you're saying, 100 now, the bills are going to keep getting continually to get higher. So I think we've got to revisit some of the things that we've already put in place to take control of the climate that we are finding ourselves having to deal with on a day-to-day basis, if we're going to make sure that the needs of our people are being met.
Very good, sir. Mr. Franklin, your thoughts on that, please.
Thank you for that question. We need to be able to focus on our carbon footprint and pollution. And oftentimes, we don't even realize it's so important to also think beyond climate change, but the impact that pollution has on human beings' airway, skin, cancer. As a healthcare provider, that's where my focus is, ensuring that our pollution and our carbon emission is lowered, because not only do we have to be concerned about the climate, but even more concerned about the health of our communities. And so many people, when I knock on doors, we'll talk about a new roof that was put on the local community's middle school. And that smell of tar is still reaping even months after we put the roof on. And so how do we make sure we protect communities' health in addition to being focused on climate change? So being focused on carbon footprint, being serious about ensuring that companies have to be very, very judicious when it comes to getting rid of stuff as they're building new products, as well as being really focused on pollution. There's so many different industries and larger companies that do pollute in our communities, and
All
those
right. Thank
really
you, sir.
directly impact the health and climate change.
Thank you very much. Mr. Brown, your thoughts.
Yes, sir. Excuse me. Climate change is urgent. If you look at any of the maps of the glaciers, how they're shrunk. As far as some of the things we need to do in the legislature, one of the things that we could do is help with building out the charging stations so we can facilitate a switch to more electric cars, because car pollution is one of the major causes of the climate change, the CO2. The other thing we can do is renewables, help more wind and solar. We can help give tax credits for that. Tangible things that could help homeowners afford to make that switch over. And I believe that will go a long ways, especially with the electric cars.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Rattigan, what do you think?
Yes, I think climate change is very important and is actually affecting everyone, and it'll affect the generation to come. In reference to legislation, we've seen a solar legislation that was going to be passed, and I think that one thing that we can do is make equal opportunity for everyone, despite their age, despite their gender, despite their zip code. Another thing that I think is very important is holding these polluters and these industries, these factories accountable for what they're putting inside of the air.
Thank you very much. We'll go with you, Ms. Neely.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about voter access. And I think I'll start with you, Marie Rattigan. Do you think any changes are needed in our current Florida laws to improve voter access to the ballot box? And 45 seconds.
I do think so, actually. With SB 90 being passed, we've seen that a lot of things were stripped, such as access to ballot drop-off boxes, right? And we also seen recently that there are police that are going to be put in place that only report back to Governor Desantis. And I think that that is a scare tactic, especially when we're talking about inside of the Black and brown community for those who are who have always been under structural attack that want to cast their votes. I think something else that we can definitely fix is the ability to extend hours when it comes to voting. Those who are in line, whether they're seniors or elderly people, we also seen that people are no longer able to give them water, give them snacks, and could actually be charged with a felony or crime.
Thank you. And Gregory James?
Well, I would just say that, in total disagreement with a lot of things that have been put in place. But I think the biggest thing that we must do, in spite of what's in place, we still have to empower our people to get out and vote until we get in a position to revitalize what has been put in place. So if we let what's in place stop us from getting to the voting pool and getting access to being an eligible voter and an active voter, then things are only going to get worse. So it is incumbent upon us to encourage all of those who are registered voters. Forget what you see for now, and let's keep voting until we get in a position to make the necessary changes.
Thank you. Hubert Brown?
Yes, there are definitely some things we need to do, such as increasing the voting hours, because a lot of people that are like when I grew up, very poor, we work in jobs that you just can't take off and go down and vote. So we often need later voting hours. Other thing is increase polling places, because a lot of times people do not have cars and trying to get to and from the polling places. And the other thing we need to do is remove what a federal judge has called a poll tax for those former felons who were given, we voted to give them a right to vote. Yet now the legislature decided that they want to put additional requirements that says, oh, you got to make sure all those fees are paid off, when often they don't even have records of what the fees are. So how do you prove that? So we would need to remove that and go with the spirit of what the Amendment 4 was.
Thank you. And Gallop Franklin?
Yes, we need to increase voter access. Absolutely. We need more precincts. There should be so many precincts based on a geographical area or square mileage, because like someone just mentioned, everyone can't really travel 20, 30, 40 minutes. And what we've seen happen is most precincts now are being taken out of communities in which the party in power does not want to vote because they typically don't vote for them. We need to make sure that we don't have a police force at these polling stations, but someone that can assist folks to vote. So not intimidate, but assist. We need to expand our early voting. Also, I have an issue with why do we have to register to vote? If we are a United States citizen and it is proved by your social security number, why do I have to fill out paper to be able to participate in my government? So we need to look into automatic registration as well. And then changing voting days. Most people work on Tuesdays. And so it's hard for the average person to take off from work to be able to go to the polls and vote. So look at even changing the actual voting days. And also, as you know, more recently.
Thank you. I realize it's hard for you to hear the bell, so I'll try to be a little bit more cognizant about that. I'm going to stay with you because I do have a follow-up that I want to ask all of you. Do you have faith that Governor Ron DeSantis' administration and the new Secretary of State, Cord Bird, will conduct a fair, impartial election and vote count? 30 seconds for the follow-up.
Yes, I do have confidence in our government to facilitate a fair and accountable election. But they're also going to employ laws such as taking precincts out of particular areas, such as decreasing access to the ballot box in certain areas so that people that don't vote for them don't have the opportunity to vote. But I do have confidence in our government to be able to facilitate accurate elections that have integrity.
Thank you. Hubert Brown?
I believe that there will be a fair physical count. But as far as we've already discussed, a fair election, the Republicans have already tried to destroy that by reducing the hours and putting it in place where you can't bring water to people standing in line on hot days and the polling places, and trying to reduce just the ability to have fair elections, such as I stated, putting that poll tax on former felons. So as far as the fairness, I think they've already tried to destroy that. But the physical count, yes.
Okay, thank you. Gregory James?
Well, I totally feel that the elections well, those that are in charge are confident enough to make sure that things are fair. I think, once again, it's incumbent upon us to just tell people to get out and vote. Don't let the obstacles stop you. Just get out and vote. And if enough people get out and vote, then we'll see the results that we're looking for.
Thank you. And Marie Rattigan.
I have hope in the people, that the people will get out and vote. Do I have hope in Governor Ron DeSantis? No, I do not, especially with all of the bills that he put in place this past session, specifically the congressional redistricting map and not making that a fair process. So I have hope in the people, but do I have hope in Governor Ron DeSantis and making this equal? No, I do not.
Thank you. And back to you, Tom Flanagan.
Okay, thank you, Trish Neely. You know, citizens are demanding action in the aftermath of multiple mass shooting tragedies at places like Parkland, Florida, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Buffalo, New York, Uvalde, Texas, Highland Park, Illinois, during a 4th of July parade and elsewhere around the country. So, what legislation as a Florida lawmaker would you support to better protect folks from gun violence and also address rising hate crimes and incidents of that sort? 45 seconds for a response. And Marie Rattigan, let's start with you.
Thank you. So before becoming a legislative aide for State Representative Felicia Robinson, I was a legislative intern for Senator Perry Thurston. In 2018, some of the students, survivors, and parents and teachers came up to the Capitol to talk with legislators in reference to gun reform. Unfortunately, some of those students, teachers, and parents left with their head held low because that same day on the House, they did not, on the floor, they did not pick up House Bill 219, which would ban assault rifles. I think the time is now for us to call for gun reform, for stricter laws, especially when it comes down to background checks. We cannot sit idly by while people are dying.
Okay, thank you. Gregory James.
Well, when we see what is happening, certainly we all must work to make gun reform something that is a priority. When we see where guns are being placed in the hands of our kids, when we see how it's so easily to be accessible to them, it's incumbent that we work hard to put laws in place. And in order to do that, we're going to have to work across the aisles to get the necessary support that we need to have. So we've got to make these things sensible, and we got to educate those who are being non-adherent to what we're saying.
Thank you. Hubert Brown.
Yes, I would give kudos to Florida in that they did raise the age after the Parkland shooting for buying guns. But there are other things we still can do. One of the things that are percolating right now is what is called a constitutional carry, meaning that you have a right to open carry. I would fight wholeheartedly against that. I believe that one should have training in order to carry a gun, just like we have training for concealed carry. Why not for younger people who are trying to buy guns to have some training, as well as some holding periods as far as buying them and increasing the mental health, having an evaluation, make sure that everything is good and that they can handle those guns.
Okay, thank you. We'll wind up the main question here with you, Gallop Franklin.
Yeah, I'll wholeheartedly fight the constitutional carry that the governor has set as a priority of his. I think that will make the situation much more difficult. Also, we need to make sure investing in those alert laws that says if someone's having any type of behavior challenges, we can then confiscate those weapons temporarily until they can be in a better place from a mental health perspective. We need to have more mental health emphasis too, because a lot of these things happen because people are struggling, going through things. We need to make sure that we're investing in mental health so that we don't have as many violent issues or challenges. We also need to make sure we have more extensive background checks. And so if someone is trying to buy a high caliber type of weapon, we need to make sure that age is higher and some more extensive background check where you're having psychological tests, having mental disorder tests to ensure that you can safely have a gun in your home and use it for all of the right reasons and of the wrong. And so once again, it's so important that we do protect our society here to prevent future gun violence.
Okay, thank you very much. Brief follow-up, just 30 seconds here, if we might. Momentum does seem to be building for open carry or campus carry amongst Republican lawmakers and the governor as well. So if you are in opposition to those sorts of things, How can you fight back on that? And Mr. Franklin, let's stick with you on that one, please.
There's some issues we have to take to the ballot box. And so because of that, we have to make sure that we organize and make sure that we're reaching out to all those folks who have been engaged in some sort of gun violence to ensure they're voting to ensure that we are safe as a society. And so, yes, you're right. Even though I might be voting against it, it's very likely that the governor can push that through the entire legislature and make it law. So we have to make sure that this August that we are at, this November, that we're very much so involved in the election process throughout the state of Florida. Every single election is on the ballot this year. Every cabinet member is on the ballot, every senator, as well as every state representative. So
very good. Mr. Brown.
Well, excuse me. One of the things we can do and need to do is to bring back some of the arguments that Republicans make for other things, such as the Don't Say Gay bill, or it can make others feel uncomfortable. Bring it back to them and let them know, hey, someone openly carrying a gun can intimidate others in enjoying their right to life, liberty, and enjoyment of life. We can also talk to them about why does hunters have to go through an education course before they can get a hunting license? So why would we not do something similar?
Okay, thank you, Mr. James.
I just think that it's got to get to the point that we're able to sit down and really have the hard conversations that need to be had and get those on the opposite side to see what is happening in our communities and see what is happening with a constant use of guns. And it's not the wild, wild west. So we've got to get them to understand that human lives are important, and that's what we're fighting for.
Okay, Ms. Rattigan.
I think it's time for us to change the narrative and also shift the narrative because we are prone to just a violent community, right? I think by shifting that narrative is something that I'm going to be interested in talking about. But not only that, standing beside the people and making sure that I would not be brought by the NRA, and I continuously say it's people over profit, and making that be known the first day when I'm in.
Thank you. Ms. Neely.
Okay. Gregory James, I'm going to start with you this time. Should Florida pass a law specifically codifying the right to access abortion services and a right to same-sex and interracial marriages? And you have 45 seconds.
Well, I think that those are situations where individuals have their own choices. And with that being said, I mean, you have to understand that the government should not place a direct will on people's lives. Their choice is their choice. Whatever those consequences are after the choice, then that's what they have to live with. I wouldn't pass a bill placing that kind of demand on people.
Thank you. Marie Rattigan, same question.
Could you repeat that question for me, please?
Should Florida pass a law specifically codifying the right to access abortion services and a right to same-sex and interracial marriages?
As one of the only candidates that was out on the front lines being vocal about issues such as Roe versus Wade, I believe that a right for a woman to choose what happens to her body is between her physician, her doctor, and her God. I don't believe that we should input any of our ideologies on individuals when it comes down to even same-sex marriage. I believe that our bodies, women bodies, are not political playgrounds. The LGBTQ bodies are not political playgrounds, and even same-sex is not up for debate. Leave people alone.
Okay, thank you. And Gallop Franklin.
Can you repeat that question, please?
Should Florida pass a law specifically codifying the right to access to abortion services as well as same-sex and interracial marriages?
Thanks. I wanted to make sure I heard that clearly. And yes, we should codify laws to make sure that we can protect women's rights to reproduction. Yes, we should codify laws, which means create and vote on laws to make sure that we protect the right between two people that love each other to be able to be married, to also under the law be able to have the same rights as any other two folks. So yes, I do believe we should codify laws to ensure that these laws do protect those who are having challenges with being able to marry someone they love, having challenges with being able to have the rights of their reproductive rights. And so we are supportive of codifying and developing and creating laws to do just what you just said. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Brown.
I believe in freedom, and I believe that every person under our Constitution have a right to privacy. So yes, I do. The other thing is, as someone who growing up was discriminated against, I would not want to see anyone discriminated against. And that is what it is when we go and try to prevent certain people from marrying who they love, interracial marriage, same sex, when we are telling women what to do with their bodies. We're discriminating. And I do not believe in discrimination against anyone. And the other thing we have, the Lord gives us a free will. And so why should the state take away our right to free will? And so, yes, I believe we should codify it.
Okay, thank you. And I do have a follow-up, and I'm going to stay with you, Hubert Brown. Do you agree with those people, including Democratic candidates for Attorney General, that the social policies advocated by the Republican majority are creating an autocracy led by Governor Ron DeSantis? 30 seconds, please.
Well, I believe it is leading to taking away our freedoms. And we need to limit government. Republicans say they believe in limited government, yet they want to get into our bedrooms. They want to tell us who we can marry. They want to tell us so much about our private life. And I believe that it is concentrating power. You can look at a number of things that were done. Normally, Republicans do not like lawsuits, yet they were telling citizens to sue the local government and assessing attorneys' fees against the local governments for certain things.
Thank you. Gregory James?
Could you repeat that?
You want me to repeat it?
Yes.
Okay. Do you agree with those, including Democratic candidates for Attorney General, that the social policies advocated by the Republican majority are creating an autocracy led by our current governor?
Absolutely. Absolutely. When we and I have to agree with Attorney Brown. When we see what we're seeing and when we see how it is limiting individuals in their own private life and in their own private choices, it's definitely interfering. And so definitely I agree with the Attorney General and those who are making that stance.
Okay, thank you. Marie Rattigan?
I would like for you to repeat that question again, please.
Do you agree with those who believe that the social policies advocated by the Republican majority are creating an autocracy that's led by our current governor, Ron DeSantis?
Yes, I do believe so. We've seen the culture war this past session. We've seen a lot of bills that attacked our fundamental rights, our freedoms. And if we're going to be frank, if we believe in body autonomy, if we believe in the right for a woman to choose, let's go across all boards with that, right? So let's talk about banning assault rifles because kids are being killed. If we want to talk about saving the babies, let's talk about the kids that are being killed in schools as well.
Thank you. And closing us out, Mr. Franklin.
Yes, liberty and freedom is so important for Florida to me in this country. And the Republican Party right now is truly encroaching on people's personal lives and not allowing them to live the freedoms and liberties in which this union should provide. And so I believe that we need to have more limited government when it comes to these social policies. Because what's really happening is you're having these attacks, such as bills like Don't Say Gay, or such as bills that's even threatening freedom of speech, where if you go and peacefully protest, there are now...
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, it's time for the ever-popular lightning round. Quick answers, one-sentence answers, please. We'll start with Mr. Brown. It's a series of questions. We'll start with Mr. Brown, and then we'll move left to right, and I'll call out your name when it's your turn to answer. One sentence, please, is your response. Mr. Brown, what are your top 3 news sources?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
What are your top 3 sources of news?
The paper, the internet, as far as reputable sites such as New York Times, and also TV.
Mr. Franklin, same question.
Same question. I do read the
I'm
Tallahassee
sorry, I was
Democrat.
looking at Mr. James. I apologize, Mr.
Wait,
James.
it's Mr.
But
James?
Mr. Franklin, go ahead. Your top 3 news sources.
Okay, I do read the Tallahassee Democrat. I also read the Capital Outlook, and I also pay attention to CNN quite often.
Mr. James.
Well, I listen to CNN, I listen to NPR at times, and I read the Democrat.
Ms. Rattigan.
CNN, the Tallahassee Democrat, and also social media.
Mr. Brown, who has endorsed your campaign?
Sheriff McNeil, Ben Crump, Carolyn Cummings, all 5 Quincy City Commissioners, and quite a few others.
Mr. James?
Corey Fuller, Randy Bush, just a lot of people who are in the community that are on a day-to-day basis making a difference, businessmen.
Ms. Rattigan?
Florida College Democrats, Run for Something, and Ruthless.
Mr. Franklin?
The Florida Board of Realtors, the Florida Chamber of Commerce, the Associated Industries of Florida, and the Southside Frenchtown Political Action Coalition.
If you could immediately enact a Florida law, what would it be? Mr. Brown?
Law stopping the rating of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund.
Mr. James?
A law that would enable those who have gotten out of school to get back in with a trade or do something productive.
Ms. Rattigan?
A law to create a parallel program with nursing to Gaston County. Sorry.
Mr. Franklin?
A working people tax credit because of the cost of goods. So those who, one sentence, a working people tax credit where people who work more than 60 hours per week can get a tax credit because of how much they're working.
If you could invalidate a Florida law, what would it be? Mr. Brown?
The Don't Say Gay bill. And also, Don't Say Gay and the bill that deals with, I'm losing it, but Don't Say Gay, I'll leave it there.
I have to consider that even more.
Ms.
House
Rattigan?
Bill 1, Combating Public Disorder.
I'm sorry?
The House Bill 1 that was recently passed, Combating Public Disorder, that's what I'll go against.
Mr. Franklin?
That same here, that organizing bill where people who are peacefully protesting can end up with criminal records for just exercising their fundamental right of speech.
Okay, just to mix it up a little bit, let's start with Mr. James with this one. Who are you endorsing at the top of the Democratic ticket for governor?
At this time, no one.
Ms. Rattigan?
Charlie Crist.
Mr. Franklin?
At this time, I'm still considering, I have not made an official endorsement at this time.
Mr. Brown?
I'm leaning toward Charlie Crist. I have not made my decision yet.
Starting with Ms. Rattigan, do you believe Joe Biden won the presidency in a fair election?
Yes.
Mr. Franklin?
Yes, I believe in the integrity of the elections of this country.
Mr. Brown?
Wholeheartedly, yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Starting with Mr. Franklin, should state workers receive annual cost of living adjustments for pay to keep pace with inflation?
Absolutely no question.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. James?
Yes.
Ms. Rattigan?
Yes.
Starting with Mr. Franklin, what's the #1 priority you'd like to accomplish for Florida A&M University as a lawmaker?
There's a whole lot within that space.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of initiatives. Right now, FAMU is trying to reach the top 100, and there's some additional resources that deal with actually paying faculty salaries, as well as investing in programs that help with retention and progression for the institution, which is our 4-year retention rate. So ensuring we can really coalesce have the resources necessary to reach that goal of being a top 100 university.
Mr. Brown?
Comparable funding as to other universities, and especially additional funding for the pharmacy program so that there's no issue about accreditation.
Mr. James?
Well, to sit down to find out what is the #1 priority that they need funding for. That would be my decision.
Ms. Rattigan?
This past legislative session, FAMU received $70 million, and that was to assist with the pharmacy school, the School of Nursing, as well as student access. Something that I would work for is a parallel program to help with the shortage of nursing, creating a parallel program from Gaston County to FAMU so that some of the nursing students would be able to go there and be able to take their colloquium and figure out if Gaston County is an area that they want to stay to help revitalize and develop.
Okay, one sentence, please. Starting with Mr. Brown, who are your largest campaign donors and what percentage of your campaign contributions are from out of state?
I do not know how much is from out of state because I have a lot of family out of state and throughout the country. My largest donor is myself.
Mr. James.
Yeah, I'm my largest donor. Most of my contributions are locally from individuals within the district.
Ms. Rattigan.
My donors are mostly working class people, and those are my main donors.
And Mr. Franklin.
My largest donor is myself, and I might have collected maybe 1 or 2 checks out of state out of 200 checks. But I have to go and check my records to confirm that. I'm not completely sure.
Okay, this is the final question. One sentence, please. Starting with Mr. James. What is the single biggest contribution you've made to your community?
The single biggest contribution that I made to my community is coming back to my community, helping to mend some of the fabrics that I once torn apart. That's mentoring our children who have parents incarcerated. That's being in the courthouse advocating for those who need a second chance.
Ms. Rattigan.
Organizing students to be vocal about issues that directly impact them, not only students, but everyday working class people, galvanizing people to just be a voice, even when they feel like they're hopeless, and putting hope into people and mentoring students in the city of Tallahassee.
Mr. Franklin.
Education, healthcare, and youth support programs. I'm a founder of a nonprofit that focuses on youth support, as well as I'm very involved with organizations such as Boy Scouts that focuses on youth support programs as well.
And Mr. Brown.
Working with young people through the teen court, where we help prevent youth from getting felony records, as well as working with the Boy Scouts and Smith Williams Service Center Foundation.
Thank you all. Ms.
Gallop
Neely?
Franklin, how would you address the teacher shortage that we have in Florida public schools? 45 seconds, please.
Great question. We have to do a better job of recruitment. Also, employing programs like Teach for America within our region. And so, as you know, Teach for America really helps recruit the best and brightest folks from across the entire country to get them involved in education. And also take a really hard look on teachers need to make more than what they're currently making, so that it's also more of a, I'm not saying that's about money, but oftentimes if you make enough money, you can focus on what's important, which is serving. And so we need to look at those 2 things, recruitment as well as incentives.
Okay, thank you. Hubert Brown, same question.
First and foremost is to increase the pace so that we can attract more teachers. Also, though, through talking to teachers such as my niece, one of the key issues is having multi-year contracts or terms, because right now a teacher has a 1-year contract generally, and so they can be let go. In essence, they're just not renewed, and now they have to go back and try to find another job. So it's not job stability. And so we need to do that, make sure that we increase the pay, give them more stability through longer term contracts, and also make sure that they feel safe in the school system, that give back some of the control that the Republicans took away in the last session by deciding what was health and safety issues.
Thank you. Gregory James?
Well, I think we all agree that a greater incentives for our teachers and being able to give them, once again, the kind of control that they need. And then again, being able to assure them how valuable they are, because at the end of the day, it's the teachers who create the presidents, who create the governors. So they are the most valuable players, and we got to make the investment that they need to feel and know that we are concerned about them and what they're doing.
Thank you. And Marie Rattigan?
Yes, to increase pay wage as well as to make it even more personal, to allow teachers in Gadsden County to have the ability to have choice, so that they're not having to come from Gadsden County to Tallahassee in order to teach for better wages, but also instill in them that they are important because they are teaching the next generation that'll be our lawyers, our attorneys, as well as our presidents.
Okay. Gallop Franklin, follow-up question, please. Do you support the Department of Education policy to waive the requirements for teachers and allow military veterans without any training in education or a college degree to teach in public schools? 30 seconds.
Only for the first year or 2 until they can get the training. So, for example, even right now as a teacher, you can substitute teach and teach for a year or 2 beforehand. And so I do support us recruiting our veterans and us supporting our veterans through an educational process. But we need to also give them time to be fully trained in order to take on the class on their own.
Thank you. Hubert Brown?
first and foremost, I support our veterans, but I do not support that they come in and teach without the training and qualifications. Our children are just too important. A better way to go about it is to give them funding to get the training and give them a stipend so that they can get training and then bring them to the school. But in our school, unfortunately, often in the minority districts is where we get we need better, I shouldn't say better, we need teachers that are fully trained to handle the situation of people with maybe discipline problems.
Gregory James?
Yeah, I support the opportunity for veterans to come into our classes, but I also feel, as Mr. Brown said, training is needed. But they bring so much value that will help give a wholesome instruction to a child just from the life that they live. Their lived experiences can make a difference standing in front of a child, talking about choices and talking about consequences. But training is definitely needed to give them that ultimate role as a teacher.
Marie Rattigan?
I do not support veterans going into the schools to be teachers without training, because teachers have to be trained and go through different processes in order for them to become teachers. And I think we need to stop waging war on our educational system and be able to instill in these teachers that they are the future, because they are taking care of the future.
Folks, our next lineup of questions goes to the issue of affordable housing. And Florida does have a housing crisis, particularly that lack of affordable workforce housing. So what can the legislature do to create more of this kind of housing? 45 seconds. Mr. Brown, you first.
As I stated earlier, the legislature already has the Sadowski Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So every time a property is sold, those taxes go into this fund. The problem is that the legislature raises it every year and uses it to plug the budget. But the other thing we can do is to work with NGOs, non-government organizations such as Habitat for Humanity. We found out in Quincy, the city has a lot of property that is not being used. So what could happen is the city could donate that to things like the NGOs like Habitat for Humanity, and then they could use that to help build the affordable housing. And the state could set up funds to help that transfer takes place and help the NGOs to multiply that money.
Okay, thank you very much. Marie Rattigan, you next.
I wanted to say that we do know that the Sadowski Fund has money in there. I think one of the legislations that needs to be put forth is restricting the use of the Sadowski Fund and making sure that it's being used for affordable housing. And it's no longer called affordable housing, it's called low-income housing, because people who are getting paid $15 a minimum wage, probably even less, can't afford to live in homes. I think something else starts with education, being able to educate the community about how they can get access to land, how they can get access to just knowing the everyday important needs of what it looks like to own a home.
Okay, Gallop Franklin.
Yeah, we need to not only protect the Sadowski Fund to ensure that a certain portion of that, I know right now a law passed that allows a certain percentage of dock stamps. It definitely goes to that fund no matter what. We need to make sure we secure it, not rate it. In addition to that, we need to make sure we have inventory, more inventory on the market. As we know, supply and demand. There's not enough homes on the market to meet the demand of Florida. And so when we do look at concurrency fees, when we do look at different types of fees that typically construction companies or developers have to pay, we can look at waiving those or investing in those to also make sure on the back end, the pricing of the house also is in a certain price range, because we can provide incentives to allow builders to build more. And then that way we can bring up the inventory, which naturally can bring down the price in like a subsidy type of percentage or scenario.
Okay, very good. And Mr. James?
Well, I think what we look forward to doing is being able to create a task force that makes sure that those Sadowski funds are used as they should be used. And with that being said, it gives opportunities for each city to partner with local churches who have massive amounts of land and educate those churches on how churches now can become a part of helping people to be able to provide housing for them, and making sure that the relationship between church and government works to give housing, because it's a need and ministry serves those kind of needs. And that task force will make sure that those funds are now being given to cities as they need them.
Okay, some related follow-ups, if we might here. Many identify a failing property insurance market. We just lost another insurer in Florida this week as a factor in the lack of housing. Do you agree? And if so, what do you bring to the table to help solve that problem? And let's stick with you, Mr. James.
Well, I think what has to happen, I do agree. I think what has to happen, we have to be able to get to the table to talk about what the needs are. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to have a voice that can help reason what needs to happen when it comes to housing. We cannot afford to allow insurance companies to continue to tax to tax housing, our properties the way they're doing it, so that it is driving the prices up. Whenever there's supply and demand, we find ourselves in such a need for the right to find ways to solve the problems that we're facing.
Okay, very good. Mr. Franklin.
Yes, looking at that question, we all know that natural disasters hit Florida almost every year. Also, there's different scams out there, such as everyone's getting a new roof based on some new type of scam. And so there's different things that we can do as looking into these challenges, and how do we make sure that we set laws in place to prevent scams from happening, but then also allowing funding to come from the state government during times of natural disaster to ensure that our insurance companies aren't going under, and also our insurance companies are not charging the consumers too much.
Okay.
So it becomes a partnership. We're going to bail you out, but you have to pass it on to the consumer as well.
Very good. Ms. Rattigan.
Yes, I think with being able to educate everybody about how property taxes is very important, and as well as this past session, we've seen that there was a extensive session because of property tax. I think too far often we're not addressing the problem and being proactive instead of reactive. There's false claims that are being made, and people are not knowing that if you have 2 or 3 claims, you're no longer going to be able to qualify for certain things. So just making sure that we're putting that educational piece in there.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Yes, insurance is definitely an important part. I remember we were looking, my brothers and I, at buying some property, and we couldn't a few years ago on the coast because we couldn't get the insurance. But one of the things we can do to help that is for those companies that write the cream of the insurance, such as auto, we can require them to, if you're going to write auto or life, you also have to write property and not let them just take off the cream. The other thing we need to do is look at reinsurance. Part of the problem right now is for most of the high risk, the companies need reinsurance, and that's a problem.
Okay, one final follow-up on this. What do you think could be done to reduce the growing number of homeless folks in our region, specifically District 8? And Mr. Franklin, your thoughts on that, please.
A great question. We need to partner with more nonprofit organizations like the Kearney. Mr. Kearney was very generous, and we have currently no homeless shelter in Gaston County either. And so ensuring that we are very strategic in how we approach this by bringing together the public sector, the private sector, as well as churches, which are part of nonprofit as well, to help really solve the problem. But starting with mental health. As we know, mental health is normally the first driver to someone becoming homeless. And we also need to make sure we're helping them develop skills. Because yes, sometimes people go down and out, but how do we make sure that they can psychologically get back to where they need to be and have the skill sets necessary, like going to trade school and funding trade schools and skills so that they can now go and employ themselves?
All righty, sir. Okay, and Mr. Brown.
One of the key issues we need is to more mental health counseling. Unfortunately, a number of the homeless do have some mental health issues. My church, we used to go over when the homeless shelter was right there on Tennessee and feed the homeless every month. That was one of our ministries. And you could just notice that a lot of these people needed counseling, as well as life counseling. And then, and when I say live counseling, help them to get on their feet, give them a place, an address, so that they can go down and get some of the assistance they need, because that's a problem.
Okay, Mr. James.
Once again, I'm going to fall back on the fact that our ministries have to be involved. I work on the Homeless Coalition Board, and one of the things that I see that is so vitally important, that to reduce the homelessness in our communities, if our churches would embrace those men and women, provide the kind of services that they need, we'll find ourselves with a smaller problem as to what we see now. It's a problem whereby all of us as a community have to engage in to make it work.
Okay, and Ms. Rattigan.
We have to be proactive instead of reactive, because the homeless people are citizens. You know, the homeless people contribute to our everyday lives, and people want to address homelessness but don't want homelessness to be inside of their community. To make it even further, with Gaston County not having a homeless shelter, let's talk about these problems. Let's put bills in place that'll address this crisis that's happening.
Okay, there is the Stop Woke Act and the Don't Say Gay bill. They both were passed on partisan votes, party line votes. Civil libertarians have problems with both issues. Supporters of public education have problems with both bills. What should the Democrats who stood in opposition to both measures, what should the Democrats do? Starting with you, Mr. Franklin.
We have to do the best that we can to repeal them. And once again, every single election and positions on the voting ballot this fall, every state senator, every state representative, and the entire cabinet. And so not only do we have to be serious about being able to repeal these bills, but even more serious about turning out to vote, to have people in position to be able to represent those who are in much need. And so in my mind, I do believe we have to take this to the ballot box, in addition to obviously advocating, talking about it, writing opinion articles about it, and also negotiating and talking to our colleagues on the other side of the aisle for them to understand the impact that this is having on so many Floridians.
Mr. Brown.
One of the things we definitely need to do is educate the public more also on why it's important. Because the Stop Woke Act, part of what that does is prevent people from our teachers from honestly teaching about my history as an African American, because they have put in those bills that, oh, if somebody might feel a little upset about it, but you know what? It's still our history. We need to teach truth, and truth has a way of winning. The same thing with the you said don't say gay. I believe that was a question. We need to go ahead and speak about truly what's in the bill, how it's not just about 3-year-olds. They also talk about how for relevant to the age group. So that puts a chilling effect on our teachers, and we need to stop that.
Mr. James.
Well, I mean, we have to become voices that educate our district week after week, month after month, on what's being passed in legislation. Once they become informed, they become inspired. Don't say gay, stay woke. The average person that's in the district, they're not concerned about that bill. They're concerned about how I'm going to eat, how I'm going to feed my family. Once we begin to educate those people in our district, then it's going to make a difference to how we see the turnout and how laws are going to be changed, because now people are informed and they're inspired.
Ms. Rattigan.
I believe that the Democrats did everything that they could with doing pushback against these bills that were creating culture wars during this past session. As a legislative aide, what inspired me to run is the Don't Say Gay bill, also House Bill 1, the Combating Public Disorder. So I think what we should be doing more of is being able to recruit young people who are interested in politics, to be able to allow them to have a platform to be heard, but not only that, allow them to be a part of the conversation.
And there is a follow-up question. How would you assess, critique Governor Ron DeSantis' policy and record on issues of race and equality? Starting with Mr. Franklin.
I believe that the governor needs some additional advisors to help him. He does seem to be completely out of touch. And so he needs to surround himself with folks to be able to make better decisions. So this last year and a half, every single policy that he's spoken about, every single policy that he's pushed forward to pass, have absolutely left marginalized communities, communities of color, the LGBTQ community, completely out of the space of being protected. And so I believe that he needs to do a better job in this space, absolutely.
Mr. Brown?
I believe it's poor. We can just look at those two bills. And part of our issue is that the governor needs to remember he's a governor of all of Florida. It seems like that doesn't even come up anymore. Governors used to talk about, once they win, I want to be the governor for the entire state. And they go to areas that others side actually listen to. Why stop going just on Fox News? Come over and talk. A lot of us listen to CNN and to other programs. Talk to us some. and try to represent everyone. And that, as a state legislature, that will be what I do. Not just District 8, but represent even those that don't vote for me, because they're still citizens, they still pay taxes, and they still deserve the protections of our government.
Mr. James?
Well, I would rate it very poorly, and I would take to heart to know that until you sit where I sit, you will never understand what I understand. So that means those of us who are serving in leadership must sit down, and we must have candid conversations with our governor to let him understand and share with him the needs of our people, to let him know what is important for us, and to be able to create the dialogue that needs to be created so that he can see that it's about all of the people. And when you decide to make laws and you veto bills, it affects us in a very damaging way. So I would be one to sit and have those heart-to-heart conversations to let you know that, hey, this is the needs, and this is how important it is that you address those needs.
Ms. Rattigan?
Through my matriculation through K through 12 in a public school and even at Florida A&M University, we received grades on a report card, and I would give Ron DeSantis an F on his report card for attacking fundamental freedoms that everybody deserved to have, because we know all Floridians deserve to be healthy, prosperous, and safe.
Thank you.
Okay, let's start with you, Marie Rattigan. And this is kind of staying on a comment that you just made about academic freedom. So we know that the Florida legislature passed and Governor Ron DeSantis signed into law a bill that makes it harder for faculty at our state universities to retain tenure. And then when the accreditation agencies raised questions about academic freedom in Florida, the legislature went on to pass a bill requiring schools to change accreditors. So my question is state government a threat to academic freedom at our state universities? 45 seconds.
Yes, I believe the teachers are being trained and they go to school to be able to teach. And I think we need to stop interjecting that into what they're supposed to be doing, what they went to school for, their training.
Thank you. Gallop Franklin, your answer, please.
Yes, as an employee of the state of Florida and as a member of the faculty at the College of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Sciences Institute of Public Health at Florida A&M University, tenure should not be touched. There's other states that have tried to change how tenure happens after you've already received tenure to kind of try to requalify. It becomes a complete inefficient process that ends up costing more money than it even having any type of impact on the outcome. And so I don't agree with that. And you're absolutely right. Right now in this space, I have more capability and capacity within higher education than the governor does, because I'm a former member of the FAME Board of Trustees and a former member of the Florida Board of Governors as well. And as he's stepping to the space, now is a part of the decisions and the reason why our state university system is where it is now. And so these type of commitments he's trying to make is going to derail our progress to continue to move forward as a system.
Thank you. And Mr. Brown.
Excuse me, there is a problem with the attack on our teachers at the university level, as well as at the secondary level of school children in K through 12, because without a teacher's ability to teach students how to critically think, you become someone that gain control over their mind and over how is known in the citizenry. And so once you control someone's thoughts and don't give them a chance to differentiate between what is true and what is not true, then that is a way to authoritarian type of government. And so anyone who do not want authoritarian type government will want our teachers to be able to openly teach our students to critically think.
Thank you. And Mr. James.
Well, as we can see, our teachers are up under a great pressure. And to see what is happening with state government when it comes to placing a threat on them, it makes it even more unbearable. So I think what has to happen even the more, we've got to fight hard for our teachers. We got to fight hard to make sure that they're comfortable in doing what they're doing. I mean, when we look at the impact that they make on the lives of people who they come in contact with, and to be considered almost at the bottom of the pay scale, there is so much we've got to do to ensure that they're treated fairly and they're not feeling the threat that government places upon them when the leadership role has the last say so in how the pen is being stroked.
Well, folks,
Thank you.
guess what? You have reached the final question before we go into our closing statements. So I can see the relief. It's palpable on your faces right now. But our final question, 45 seconds for each of you. The Florida legislature, as we've already kind of indicated in some of our other topics here, has preempted local authorities on issues such as worker benefits, gun control, environmental regulations, just to name a few. Should the balance of power between the state and local governments be redefined? 45 seconds. And Gregory James, what do you think?
Well, when we look at the power, definitely we need to redefine it. I mean, I feel and believe that when you redefine it, you put it back into the hands of those who are dealing with government on a day-to-day basis. People who are out of touch with what happens in our community, who are out of touch with what happens in the people's lives, make decisions that really impact people without even knowing what they're doing. So we've got to redefine it so that people can understand that government is governed by the people for the people. So yes, redefine it. We've got to.
Okay, Marie Rattigan.
I would say that we definitely have to redefine it, redefine what power even looks like, because what I truly believe, the people have more power than the people in power. And as long as we continue to use our voice and be vocal about issues that affect us, we'll be able to shift the narrative.
Okay, Gallop Franklin.
Can you repeat that question again, please?
Certainly. Florida legislature has been on a preemption binge, as some people have suggested over the past several years, in such things as environmental rules and regulations and gun control and some other items when it comes to usurping a local jurisdiction. It's been suggested. So do you think the balance between state and local governments in Florida should be redefined?
You're absolutely right. I completely support home rule, which means that local governments get elected by their local constituencies to pass day-to-day laws that oversee their local people. And so within that space, if they're not doing their job, then the people there have the right to elect someone else that will do their job. And so I don't support the state of Florida continuously going in and essentially telling mayors, telling city commissioners, and telling county commissioners how they should govern their city or their local municipalities. I do understand there's some situations like people that might own private property. At that point, should the state be somewhat involved within the rights that you should have in reference to owning your property? Maybe there's a conversation, but I do support home rule 95, 97% of the time, because I truly believe that mayors, city commissioners, county commissioners should govern their local municipalities.
Okay, very good. And we'll wrap up with you, Mr. Brown.
Definitely, we need to re-establish the relationship. And we need to remind Republicans that they used to be for more local control and less centralized government, and explain that to them, and so we can get back to them, because we do have to work with them. And part of the issue is that generally the local leaders have a better understanding of the problems for that particular community. For example, if we go back to the COVID, beginning of that, the local people knew where the hot spots were and where they needed more control. So I believe the state government, as well as the federal, should be more into putting limits, floors as to what is needed, not maximums, not maximums.
Thank you very much, folks. We have reached the conclusion of the forum as far as our specific questions are concerned. And in this final wrap up, you get to speak directly to the voters and kind of make your elevator pitch, if you will. And yes, indeed, it can take an entire minute to get from the plaza level of the Capitol all the way up to the 22nd floor, as I'm sure you are aware. So you got the voters in that elevator for the whole minute. You can mention your website and anything else that you'd like to in 1 minute. And we'll start with you, Gallop Franklin.
I just want to say thank you again for giving us this opportunity to have a robust discussion on how to move this community forward. We're focused on three things: economic development, education, healthcare, and we have real life experiences doing just that. By trade, I'm a pharmacist. I am the only person only candidate with the experience that I have in healthcare. By trade, I'm a faculty member, and I also oversee the curriculum committee at the College of Pharmacy, Pharmaceutical Services, Institute of Public Health at FAMU. Once again, education is within my wheelhouse, as well as economic development. I'm also a small business owner. I've been very involved in creating jobs and growing small businesses here in this region for a very long time now. And so we are a candidate that's prepared to ensure that we can protect FAMU. I'm a former member of the FAMU Board of Trustees, former member of the Florida Board of Governors also. So that gives us the insight necessary to ensure we can protect the rich tradition and legacy of FAMU as well. Please visit us on our website, gallopfranklin.org. Thank you for your.
Thank you very much. Hubert Brown, you're up.
Good afternoon. I request your vote because I'm someone who have lived the steps and that most of the citizens of District 8 have. I grew up poor in a household that did not have adequate housing, didn't have indoor plumbing for quite a while. I grew up in a situation where I had to work through college. I grew up in a situation where starting a business and knowing all the costs and problems to do that. And because of that, when citizens come to me and explain their problems, I know about those problems. I know about how helping with the elderly parent. My mother is 98 years old. So I know that when they come to me that we need to get things done for affordable housing, I'm going to fight for it because I know how it felt not to have adequate housing. I'm going to fight for economic development because I know that every citizen need to have a good job. And I'm going to fight for education because I know without FAMU, I would not be where I am today. So I'm not just, that's something I heard about. This is something I know about. Hire a lawyer to go up there and represent you.
Thank you very much. Gregory James, you're next.
Well, listen, since we're on this elevator and I only have a short period of time with you, let me share this with you. Back in 1995, I know what it means for District 8 to have the fabrics torn apart because I was a part of that. In 1985, I tore the fabrics of my community apart, sentenced to life plus 40 years. I could have easily, when 2008 came, went to another city where no one knew my name and started to live my life all over again. But because I said to myself, I've got to come back and mend the fabrics, I came back to my community, back to District 8, back to the community that I once tore apart and started working. So for well over a decade, I've been fighting for things, issues, and needs of our community, fighting to make sure that our community is safe again, fighting to make sure that we stop crime in our community, fighting to organize leaders in one place, such as the prayer breakfast that I do for the last 5 years that bring over 700 people together, fighting to make sure that ex-felons have the right to vote again. That was through Amendment 4. And when you vote for me, you're voting for a candidate who knows how to fight and will fight. Visit our website, GregJamesForHouseDistrict8.com.
Marie Rattigan, you get the last word.
Yeah, so this past session, I was a legislative aide, so I had a front row seat on how laws were being crafted to directly impact everyday working class people. And because of that, I decided to put in my 2 weeks and make that sacrifice because I know that the people of House District 8 need someone that's going to be an advocate for them, a continued voice for them, but also be able to make that sacrifice for their everyday needs. Running is new to me, but advocating for the people is true to me. It's what I've been doing. I'm a community organizer. I've helped with Amendment 4. I've galvanized students to the poll, host panels about the political education and the time that we're in. Had a lawsuit against Governor Ron Desantis in reference to House Bill 1 and the combating public disorder and 1. So the people need someone that's going to fight for them, that's not going to be brought out by the NRA, that's not going to be there when they need to cast a vote, whether that's green for yes or N for no, red for no. I'll be that person for you, and you can visit me at marieforflorida.com and on social media, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram at Marie Rattigan or Marie for Florida.
That's it. Thank you to the Tallahassee Democrat, the League of Women Voters of Tallahassee, WFSU Public Media, and our candidates for joining us for the program. You can find a replay of the forum on our YouTube pages, Tallahassee.com and WFSU.org. The recorded broadcast set to hit your radio Thursday, August 4th at 11 a.m. on WFSU 88.9 FM.
And our next live web stream forum will be Thursday, July the 28th at 1 p.m. And it will be the seven candidates for the Leon County Commission District 2 race. Running for that seat are Sabrina M. Allen, Linda Gale Bell, Christian Caban, Hannah Crow, William Lindsay Crowley, Max Epstein, and Manny Joannis.
And you can look for our special election section of the Tallahassee Democrat with interviews of all the candidates on the ballot, which will be printed and inserted on Sunday, August 7th. Thank you for watching. Thank you to the candidates for participating and to the WFSU public media crew for being here. Everyone, have a great day.